This is not an ordinary morning. This is a divinely appointed moment. You did not wake up by accident. You were awakened on purpose. Breath is in your lungs because heaven still has an assignment attached to your name. Before the noise of the world competes for your attention, before fear tries to negotiate your focus, before distractions dilute your destiny, you must take authority over this day. Morning is not just a time on the clock. It is a spiritual gateway. What you declare at the start determines what manifests by the end. Today, you rise not as a victim of circumstances, but as a commander of atmosphere. This morning, align your spirit before you align your schedule. When prayer becomes your first response instead of your last resort, chaos loses its power. Speak before the world speaks to you. Establish dominion before resistance shows up. You are not waiting to see what kind of day this will be. You are deciding it. The moment your feet touch the ground, heaven is listening for your voice. Authority responds to alignment, and alignment begins with prayer. Lift your heart and declare today, purpose outruns pressure. Today, clarity overrides confusion. Today, wisdom speaks louder than worry. You are not stepping into this day unprepared. You are stepping in covered, guarded, and guided. Every plan that was formed against your peace loses momentum now. Every word spoken in faithlessness is canceled by the power of intentional prayer. You are not behind. You are right on time. This is the day to consecrate your thoughts. What you think about consistently, you empower unconsciously. So this morning, you discipline your mind to agree with truth, not trauma. You refuse to rehearse yesterday's failures or tomorrow's fears. You anchor yourself in the now, where grace is active and strength is available. Anxiety has no jurisdiction where prayer is practiced. Fear cannot stay where authority is exercised. As this day unfolds, doors will open because you prayed. Connections will align because you prayed. Favor will locate you because you prayed. Prayer is not begging. It is legislating. It is speaking from position, not desperation. You are not asking for permission to succeed. You are declaring the will of heaven over your life. When you pray, resistance weakens. When you pray, insight sharpens. When you pray, endurance increases. Declare over your work, excellence is my standard. Declare over your home, peace is my portion. Declare over your body, strength is my inheritance. Declare over your finances, provision is my reality. You are not subject to the economy of fear. You operate under the economy of faith. Resources respond to obedience, and obedience is activated through prayer. This morning, choose discipline over delay. Choose faith over feelings. Choose alignment over anxiety. Every assignment tied to this day requires your participation. Heaven is ready, but readiness must be met with response. Do not underestimate the power of a focused prayer spoken early. What you address now will not have to chase you later. As the sun rises, so does your authority. You are empowered to interrupt cycles, to rewrite narratives, to establish new standards. The same strength that carried you through past battles is present for today's victories. You are equipped, authorized, and supported. Grace is not exhausted. Mercy is not limited. Possibility is not depleted. Now take a moment and breathe. Let peace settle your spirit. Let confidence steady your steps. Let boldness govern your decisions. This day is loaded with opportunity, but opportunity favors those who are spiritually alert. Stay watchful. Stay prayerful. Stay aligned. And now, rise and move with intention. Speak life wherever you go. Carry authority in every room. Walk knowing that heaven backs what you declare in faith. Do not postpone obedience. Do not silence your voice. Do not shrink back from your assignment. Start this day with prayer and then walk it out with action. Speak what you prayed. Do what you declared. Move like you believe it is already done. This is your moment. Take it. The morning is presented as far more than the start of daily activity. It is described as a spiritual doorway where authority is either claimed or surrendered. The earliest moments of the day carry a unique weight because they are uncontested territory. Before external voices begin to shape thoughts, before responsibilities pull attention in multiple directions, and before emotional residue from yesterday tries to resurface, the morning offers a clean spiritual slate. What is spoken, believed, and declared in these first moments establishes the atmosphere that will govern the entire day. The speech emphasizes that days do not happen randomly. They are framed. Whoever controls the frame controls the outcome. And the morning is when that frame is set. The content highlights that the spirit is most receptive at the start of the day. Just as the ground is easiest to cultivate before it hardens, the soul is most open to alignment before it is cluttered with pressure and distraction. When prayer is engaged early, it anchors the inner world before the outer world demands attention. This early engagement prevents the day from being reactive and instead makes it intentional. The morning becomes a moment of spiritual positioning, where clarity is chosen over confusion and purpose over pressure. Rather than waking up to chase the day, the speaker encourages waking up to command it. The speech also reinforces that authority is time sensitive. What is not declared early will have to be confronted later. If fear is not addressed in the morning, it will grow louder by midday. If peace is not established early, stress will negotiate control as the day unfolds. Morning prayer functions as preemptive governance, settling matters before they have the opportunity to escalate. It is during this time that unseen resistance is weakened, not because circumstances have changed yet, but because authority has been asserted in advance. Another critical emphasis is that mornings carry prophetic potential. Words spoken at the start of the day do not merely describe what is hoped for, they define what is permitted. Declarations made in the morning act as spiritual boundaries, determining what is allowed to enter the day and what must remain outside of it. Confusion, distraction, delay, and discouragement are confronted before they gain access. The speech portrays the morning as a gate that must be guarded intentionally because whatever passes through it influences everything that follows. The speaker also connects morning prayer with spiritual consistency. When authority is established daily at the same starting point, momentum builds. The day no longer begins in survival mode, but in alignment. Over time, this practice trains the mind, conditions the spirit, and strengthens discernment. The morning becomes a sacred rhythm where identity is reaffirmed, purpose is remembered, and direction is clarified before movement begins. The speech presents prayer as a position of strength rather than a posture of desperation, redefining it as an act of authority that shapes outcomes instead of reacting to them. Prayer is not portrayed as something done only when options are exhausted, but as a deliberate exercise of dominion. When prayer is approached from authority, it shifts the mindset from asking for rescue to enforcing alignment. The speaker emphasizes that prayer is effective not because of emotional intensity, but because of spiritual position. Authority is not raised in the moment of crisis. It is recognized before the crisis arrives, and prayer becomes the mechanism through which that authority is exercised. The content highlights that desperation-driven prayer is often rooted in fear, uncertainty, and a sense of powerlessness, whereas authoritative prayer is rooted in confidence, clarity, and spiritual awareness. When someone prays from desperation, they wait for circumstances to change before believing. When someone prays from authority, belief is established first and circumstances are expected to follow. This distinction transforms prayer from a reaction to pressure into a command over pressure. The speech encourages listeners to stop negotiating with fear and start speaking from alignment, understanding that authority does not plead, it declares. Another key emphasis is that prayer functions as legislation. Just as laws determine what is permitted within a territory, prayer defines what is allowed to operate within a person's life and day. Through authoritative prayer, limits are set, boundaries are enforced, and order is restored. The speaker underscores that prayer is not passive communication, it is active governance. Words spoken in faith carry weight because they are backed by spiritual jurisdiction. When prayer is spoken from authority, resistance weakens, not because resistance disappears instantly, but because its right to remain is revoked. The speech also addresses the misconception that authority in prayer is arrogance. Instead, it frames authority as alignment with divine intention. True authority is not self-generated. It flows from agreement with higher purpose. When prayer aligns with truth, it carries legitimacy. This legitimacy produces confidence, not pride and assurance, not presumption. The speaker explains that authority grows through consistency, as daily alignment trains the spirit to speak without hesitation or doubt. Additionally, the content stresses that authoritative prayer removes emotional volatility from spiritual practice. Rather than being driven by mood, energy, or circumstances, prayer becomes disciplined and intentional. Even when emotions fluctuate, authority remains stable. This stability allows prayer to function as a constant force rather than an occasional emergency response. The speaker emphasizes that when prayer becomes the first response, chaos loses its leverage because order has already been established through spoken authority. The speech emphasizes that alignment must come before activity because action without alignment leads to exhaustion, confusion, and misdirection. Before schedules are filled, decisions are made, or responsibilities are addressed, the inner world must be brought into order. Alignment is described as the intentional positioning of the spirit, mind, and will so that they move in agreement rather than competition. When alignment is neglected, the day becomes reactive, driven by urgency instead of purpose. The speaker highlights that many struggles are not the result of external opposition, but of internal misalignment, where thoughts, emotions, and intentions are pulling in different directions. The content explains that prayer is the primary tool used to achieve this alignment. Through prayer, focus is sharpened and priorities are clarified. Instead of allowing external demands to dictate direction, alignment allows purpose to lead. When the spirit is aligned first, decisions become clearer, reactions become calmer, and discernment becomes stronger. The speech reinforces that alignment creates stability, and stability produces dominion. Without alignment, authority becomes inconsistent. But when alignment is established early, authority flows naturally throughout the day. Another significant emphasis is that alignment protects energy. When the inner world is aligned, energy is not wasted on unnecessary battles, emotional turbulence, or mental clutter. Misalignment drains strength because it forces a person to constantly adjust, recover, and compensate. The speaker presents alignment as a form of spiritual efficiency where effort is focused rather than scattered. This efficiency allows clarity to replace chaos and intention to replace impulse. Alignment ensures that actions are purposeful rather than frantic. The speech also addresses how alignment affects perception. When alignment is present, situations are interpreted through wisdom instead of emotion. Challenges are seen as assignments rather than threats, and pressure is understood as resistance rather than defeat. This shift in perception is critical because it determines response. Aligned individuals respond thoughtfully instead of reacting emotionally. The speaker stresses that alignment gives the ability to pause, discern, and act with precision even under pressure. Additionally, the content highlights that alignment establishes boundaries. When the inner world is aligned, it becomes easier to recognize what does not belong. Distractions, unnecessary obligations, and draining influences lose their power because they are identified quickly and addressed decisively. Alignment empowers the ability to say no without guilt and yes without hesitation. It reinforces the understanding that not every opportunity deserves access and not every demand requires compliance. The speech further emphasizes that alignment is not a one-time experience but a daily discipline. Each day brings new variables, pressures, and decisions that require recalibration. By prioritizing alignment before action, the speaker teaches that dominion is maintained rather than recovered. The day unfolds with greater order, confidence, and clarity because the inner foundation was established before movement began. The speech places strong emphasis on the discipline of the mind, teaching that thoughts are not neutral and must be governed intentionally. The mind is described as a powerful gatekeeper, capable of either reinforcing truth or amplifying fear, depending on what it is allowed to dwell on. Without discipline, the mind defaults to past experiences, emotional wounds, and imagined outcomes, many of which have no authority over the present moment. The content makes it clear that destiny is not only shaped by actions, but by repeated thought patterns, and unmanaged thinking can quietly sabotage progress even when intentions are sincere. The speaker stresses that the mind must be trained to agree with truth rather than trauma. Trauma speaks in memories, emotions, and learned reactions, often disguising itself as logic or self-protection. When left unchallenged, it influences decisions, weakens confidence, and distorts perception. Disciplined thinking confronts these internal narratives and replaces them with deliberate agreement with truth. This is not denial of reality, but a refusal to allow fear-based interpretations to dominate perspective. The speech highlights that whatever the mind rehearses consistently becomes the lens through which life is interpreted. Another key focus is that thoughts create permission. What is repeatedly entertained internally eventually gains influence externally. When worry is given constant attention, it gains authority. When doubt is rehearsed, it becomes expectation. The speech teaches that discipline means interrupting destructive thought cycles before they settle into belief systems. This interruption requires awareness and intentional redirection. The mind must be taught where to focus, what to reject, and what to reinforce. Discipline is not about suppressing thoughts, but about choosing which ones are allowed to remain. The content also emphasizes that disciplined thinking strengthens faith. Faith is not weakened by challenges, but by unmanaged mental dialogue. When thoughts are aligned with truth, faith becomes stable instead of emotional. The speaker explains that faith operates best in an environment of mental order. A disciplined mind does not fluctuate wildly based on circumstances. It remains anchored even when external conditions shift. This stability allows confidence to grow, decisions to be made without panic, and endurance to increase under pressure. The speech further highlights that the mind must be renewed daily because every day introduces new information, pressures, and voices competing for attention. Without daily discipline, the mind becomes cluttered, overwhelmed, and reactive. The speaker frames mental discipline as a form of spiritual stewardship, where responsibility is taken for what is allowed to influence thoughts. This stewardship protects peace, sharpens discernment, and preserves focus. Finally, the content reinforces that disciplined thinking empowers consistency. When the mind agrees with truth, behavior follows naturally. Discipline in thought produces discipline in action, speech, and response. The inner world becomes ordered, and that order begins to manifest outwardly in clarity, confidence, and purposeful movement. The speech underscores that spoken declarations are not motivational statements, but intentional activations that give direction to the day. Words are presented as carriers of authority, capable of releasing momentum, shaping expectation, and opening access to opportunities that already exist but require recognition. When declarations are spoken with clarity and conviction, they establish alignment between belief and action. The speaker makes it clear that silence often allows uncertainty to dominate, while intentional speech defines what is permitted to operate. Declarations are framed as spiritual signals that announce readiness, expectation, and confidence. The content explains that favor responds to declaration because favor is attracted to alignment. When words reflect confidence rather than fear, access increases. Doors do not open merely because they exist. They open when expectation meets opportunity. Declarations prepare the inner posture to recognize and respond when access is presented. The speech emphasizes that many opportunities are missed, not because they never appeared, but because the mindset was not positioned to see them. Spoken affirmation sharpens awareness and creates anticipation, which in turn accelerates movement toward progress. Another important emphasis is that declarations establish ownership. Speaking over work, health, finances, and purpose is portrayed as a way of claiming responsibility rather than waiting for external validation. When individuals declare excellence over their work, they commit to higher standards. When they declare strength over their bodies, they reinforce discipline and resilience. These declarations shape behavior by reinforcing identity. The speaker highlights that people often act in alignment with what they consistently say about themselves, and intentional declarations prevent identity from being defined by circumstances. The speech also connects declarations to provision. Provision is not depicted as random supply, but as a response to alignment and stewardship. When declarations reflect trust and expectation, they remove mental resistance to receiving. Fear of lack often blocks flow by creating hesitation, doubt, and mismanagement. Speaking provision over finances does not eliminate responsibility, but it sharpens discernment and encourages wiser decisions. The content emphasizes that provision follows clarity, and clarity is reinforced through spoken alignment. Additionally, the content stresses that declarations create endurance. Speaking strength in moments of pressure reinforces persistence. When challenges arise, declared words become internal anchors that stabilize focus. Instead of collapsing under resistance, declared truth reminds the mind of established expectations. This endurance allows individuals to remain consistent even when immediate results are not visible. The speech highlights that consistency, fueled by declaration, often produces breakthroughs that sporadic effort cannot. The speaker further explains that declarations are most effective when practiced daily. Repetition is not redundancy, it is reinforcement. Each spoken word strengthens agreement between belief, behavior, and expectation. Over time, declarations recondition thought patterns, reshape emotional responses, and establish a rhythm of confidence. As this rhythm develops, access, favor, and provision begin to align naturally with the posture that has been consistently declared. The speech makes it clear that prayer reaches its full power only when it is followed by intentional movement. Prayer is presented as the foundation, not the finish line. While prayer establishes alignment, authority, and clarity, action is what gives visible form to what has been declared. The speaker emphasizes that faith is not passive agreement, but active participation. What is spoken in prayer must be reinforced by choices, decisions, and behavior that reflect belief. Without action, prayer remains potential rather than manifestation. The content highlights that bold action is a demonstration of trust. When individuals move forward despite uncertainty, they confirm that they believe what they prayed. Hesitation often reveals internal doubt, not external limitation. The speech teaches that waiting for perfect conditions delays progress because movement itself often creates clarity. Action invites momentum, and momentum invites opportunity. When prayer is followed by decisive steps, resistance weakens because confidence replaces fear. The speaker stresses that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let fear dictate direction. Another key emphasis is that intentional action requires responsibility. Once a declaration is made, accountability follows. Speaking purpose demands commitment to discipline. Declaring excellence requires consistency. The speech reinforces that action proves sincerity. It is easy to speak words of faith, but it is movement that tests belief. Through action, priorities are revealed and alignment is confirmed. The speaker explains that consistent action, even in small steps, builds credibility within the inner world and strengthens confidence. The content also stresses that bold action carries influence. When individuals act with confidence, they shift the atmosphere around them. Decisions become clearer, communication becomes stronger, and presence becomes more authoritative. Action turns internal conviction into external leadership. The speech emphasizes that authority is recognized when it is expressed, not hidden. Acting on prayer positions individuals as participants rather than observers in their own progress. Additionally, the speaker highlights that action sustains faith. Faith that is never exercised becomes theoretical. Movement keeps belief alive by constantly engaging it. Each step reinforces the expectation that progress is possible. Even setbacks become instructional rather than discouraging because action provides feedback and refinement. The speech teaches that forward motion prevents stagnation and keeps focus on growth rather than fear. Finally, the content emphasizes that action completes alignment. When behavior matches belief, integrity is established. The inner and outer worlds move in agreement, creating consistency and stability. Prayer initiates alignment, but action maintains it throughout the day. As individuals speak life, they must also walk in it, carrying confidence into every environment and making decisions that reflect the authority they have already claimed.